She should have died out there. No one would have known the difference. Not in a storm like this. Not on land that swallowed tracks as fast as they were made. The wind came screaming across the plains, a low, endless howl that pressed against Eliza Hart's chest until every breath felt borrowed, thin and fragile, her lungs burning as cold air sliced down her throat, her legs dragging through snow that reached past her ankles, each step slower than the last. Her dress clung to her skin, soaked and stiff, the fabric pulling tight against her body with every movement, heavy as if the storm itself refused to let her go. She could not feel her fingers anymore. She was not sure she could feel anything at all. Just the ache, just the hollow, just the quiet, creeping certainty that if she stopped, even for a second, she would not get back up. The world had narrowed to white and gray, sky and ground bleeding together until there was no direction left, no path, no promise, only the sound of her own breath, ragged and uneven, and the distant, relentless groan of the wind. Then she saw it, a shape, dark against the storm. At first, she thought it was another trick of the snow, another shadow moving where nothing should be, but it did not disappear. It grew larger, solid, a gate, wood, tall and worn, half buried in drifting snow. Beyond it, barely visible through the swirling white, a house stood alone against the land, its windows glowing faint and steady, like something alive in a place that should not allow it. Warmth. The word did not feel real anymore, but her body remembered it, reacted to it, pulling her forward with the last strength she did not know she had left. Her boots slipped. She stumbled, caught herself, kept going. Each step felt heavier than the one before, her vision narrowing, edges darkening, until even the light blurred and stretched into something distant and unreachable. She reached the gate. Her hand hit the wood, rough, frozen, the impact barely registering through the numbness. The world tilted. Her knees buckled, and then she fell. Not slowly, not gracefully, just gone. The snow caught her, cold and final, swallowing the last of her warmth as her breath came shallow, uneven, fading into the storm that did not care if she lived or died. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, somewhere beyond the roar of the wind, a sound. A door, opening, heavy, deliberate, boots against wood, measured, unhurried, as if whoever stepped out into that storm was not afraid of it. Not even a little. The sound came closer. Stopped. Silence, except for the wind clawing at everything in reach. And then, a presence. Close. Watching. She could not lift her head, could not see clearly, but she felt it, the shift in the air, the weight of someone standing over her, unmoved by the storm that was breaking her apart. A shadow fell across her face, blocking what little light remained. A man, tall, still, solid as the land itself. He did not speak right away, did not kneel, did not rush. He just stood there, looking down at her like he was deciding something that would change everything for her, though she did not know it yet. Her breath hitched, a weak sound, barely there. The wind surged again, pushing snow across her body, trying to cover her, claim her, but it did not reach her face anymore. Not completely. Something blocked it. Him. And then, finally, a voice, low, steady, controlled, cutting through the storm like it belonged there more than the wind did. You picked the wrong night to come this far. A pause. Heavy. Measured. We're the only one that might keep you alive. For a long second, nothing moved. Not him, not her, not even the air between them, as if the storm itself had paused to see what he would do. Then he stepped forward. Slow. Certain. Boots pressing deep into the snow with a weight that did not hesitate. He crouched beside her, close enough now that she could hear it, the steady rhythm of his breathing, controlled, unshaken, so different from her own shallow gasps that barely held together. "Can you stand?" he asked, his voice low, not harsh, but not gentle either, something measured in between, like a man used to giving orders without raising his tone. Eliza tried. Her fingers twitched first, then her shoulder, but her body did not follow. The cold had taken too much. A faint sound left her lips, something between a breath and a refusal. His eyes stayed on her, sharp, observant, taking in everything, the tremble in her jaw, the way her dress clung to her frame, the exhaustion she could no longer hide. No pity crossed his face, only calculation. Then, without another word, He reached for her. His hand closed around her arm. Firm, steady, heat seeping through the layers of wet fabric. Grounding, undeniable. She flinched, just slightly. Not from pain. From the shock of it. From how solid he felt. Easy, he said, quieter now, closer. I have got you. The words were simple, but they settled somewhere deep, somewhere she had not realized was still listening. He pulled her up, not roughly, but without hesitation, guiding her weight against him as her legs failed to cooperate. For a moment, she was pressed to him, her cheek brushing the rough fabric of his coat, the scent of leather and smoke filling her senses, warm, real, too close. Her breath caught. His arm tightened, just enough to keep her from slipping, just enough to remind her she was not the one in control. The wind slammed against them again, sharp and relentless, but it did not reach her the same way now. He turned his body, angling himself between her and the worst of it, taking the force without comment. Protection, quiet and absolute. She felt it before she understood it. He started walking, each step deliberate, carrying more of her weight than she could manage, his grip unwavering as they crossed the short distance to the porch. The boards creaked under his boots, a hollow, familiar sound that seemed louder in the storm's brief lull. The door stood open behind him, spilling a thin line of golden light into the night, cutting through the white like a promise she did not trust yet. He stopped just inside the threshold. Not fully in, not fully out. The wind pushed at his back, trying to force them forward, but he did not move. Instead, he looked down at her again. Close now. Close enough that she could finally see his face clearly, the hard lines carved by weather and time, the faint shadow of stubble along his jaw, the eyes, steady, unreadable, watching her like he was still deciding. Once you step inside, he said, voice quieter than before, almost lost beneath the wind, you do not walk back out into that storm tonight. A statement, not a question. Her heart stuttered, not from the cold this time, but from something else, something that tightened in her chest as she realized the weight behind his words. Shelter, safety, and something more she could not name yet. Her fingers curled weakly against his coat, the fabric rough beneath her touch. She should have pulled away. She did not. The wind howled again, louder, angrier, as if reminding her what waited outside if she chose wrong. He did not rush her, did not push, just stood there, holding her steady, his presence filling the space, patient, controlled, certain she would understand what he had not said out loud. And slowly, despite everything, she lifted her head just enough to meet his eyes, her voice barely more than a breath. What happens if I do? His eyes did not leave hers. Not when she spoke, not when the wind howled louder behind him, not even when her fingers tightened slightly against his coat like she had forgotten how to let go. The question hung there, fragile and dangerous all at once. He exhaled slowly, a thin cloud of breath curling between them in the cold air, his grip on her steady, unyielding. Then you stay, he said, voice even, almost too calm for the weight behind it. And nothing about that comes free. The words settled between them, heavier than the storm, heavier than the dark pressing in from all sides. Eliza felt it, the shift, the invisible line she had just stepped up to, not yet crossed, but close enough to feel the pull. Her heart beat harder now, not from the cold, but from the choice tightening around her. Stay, and owe him something she did not understand yet. Leave, and the storm would finish what it had already started. Her throat tightened. She swallowed, forcing her voice to hold. You think I have a choice? It was not quite a question, not quite defiance. Something in between, fragile but still standing. His jaw moved slightly, the only sign her words had landed. Out here, he said, tilting his head just enough toward the storm clawing at the porch. There is always a choice. A pause, just not always a good one. Silence followed, thick and suffocating, broken only by the low groan of the wind pressing against the cabin walls and the faint creak of wood shifting under pressure. Eliza's breath came uneven, her body trembling not just from the cold anymore, but from the weight of being seen too clearly. He knew exactly what she was. Desperate. Alone. At the edge of something she could not come back from. And still, he waited. Did not pull her inside. Did not push her away. Control, quiet and absolute, resting entirely in his hands. Her gaze dropped for a second, catching on the open doorway behind him, the firelight flickering inside, warm, steady, real. It looked impossible. It felt like a lie. She lifted her eyes again, meeting his, searching for something, anything that might tell her what kind of man stood in front of her. She found nothing easy, only that same steady presence, that same unreadable calm, like he had already decided he would not be the one to break first. The wind surged again, stronger this time, driving snow across the porch, biting into her exposed skin, sharp and immediate. Her body reacted before her mind did, leaning closer into the only warmth within reach. Him. His hand shifted slightly at her arm, not pulling her in, not letting her drift away either, holding her exactly where she was, close enough to feel the heat of him, far enough to remind her this was not hers yet. "If I step inside," she said, quieter now, her voice threading through the storm, "what do you take?" There it was. The real question. Not about the storm. Not about the night. About him. His eyes darkened just a fraction. Something flickering there. Something deeper than calculation now. Something that watched her the way a man watches a line he intends to cross, but not carelessly. Not without knowing the cost. He leaned in slightly, just enough that his voice did not have to fight the wind anymore. Just enough that she felt it more than heard it. "What you can give," he said. Simple. Controlled. Final. Her breath caught. Not because of the words. Because of how close he was now. Because of how easily he had stepped into that space without breaking it, without asking permission, and how her body had not moved away. The storm slammed against the cabin again, louder, harder, as if the world itself was forcing the moment forward. His grip tightened just a fraction, steadying her as her knees threatened to give again. "Decide," he said, low, not a command, not quite, but close enough to feel like one. "Because I am not carrying you back out there." The truth of it hit her all at once. He would not force her, but he would not save her twice either. And for the first time, she realized something that had not been clear before, something that shifted the ground beneath everything she thought she understood. He was not just offering shelter. He was testing her. The wind surged again, harder than before, forcing a sharp whistle through the cracks of the wooden walls behind him, a sound that carried warning, pressure, something that would not wait much longer. Eliza felt it in her bones, in the way her body trembled, in the way the cold kept reaching for her no matter how close she stood to him. And still, she did not move. Not yet. Not the way he expected. Her fingers tightened against his coat, then slowly, deliberately, she pulled them back, creating the smallest distance between them, barely an inch, but enough to change something. His eyes followed the movement. Not her hand. The choice behind it. A shift. Subtle but real. "What I can give," she repeated, her voice steadier now, though the tremor had not fully left it. "That means I decide what that is." The words hung there, fragile but sharp, cutting through the space between them in a way the wind could not. For the first time, something in his expression changed, not softened, not weakened, but sharpened, as if she had stepped into a line he had not expected her to hold. He straightened slightly, not releasing her, but not pulling her closer either, his control tightening, recalibrating. "You are in no position to bargain," he said quietly. Not cruel, just true. The kind of truth that pressed down harder than any threat. Eliza swallowed, her throat dry despite the cold, but she did not look away. That was the difference now. She stayed. "Then I walk," she said, barely above a breath, but the meaning landed all the same. The wind answered her, slamming against the cabin, a violent reminder of what that would mean, of how quickly the world outside would take her back and finish what it had started. Her body flinched instinctively, betraying her, but she did not step back toward him. Not yet. Not completely. Silence stretched, heavy and dangerous. He watched her, long enough that the moment began to shift again, tension tightening into something sharper, something more personal. Then his hand moved. Not forceful, not sudden, just enough to close the distance she had created, his fingers settling at her arm again, firm, grounding, reminding her exactly how little space there really was between choice and consequence. "You would not make it 10 yards, he said, low. Closer now, his voice no longer carried by the wind, but by the space between them, controlled, certain. "You know that." She did. That was the problem. That was the trap. Her breath hitched, just once, her gaze flickering past him to the storm beyond the porch, then back to him. as if weighing which danger she understood better. His thumb shifted slightly against her sleeve, not a caress, not softness, but something intentional, a steady pressure that held her in place without forcing her. Protection, control, both at once. I am not asking for free, she said again, quieter now, but more deliberate. I am asking for terms. There it was. Not surrender. Not yet. Something else. Something that made the space between them tighten in a different way. Something that made his gaze narrow just a fraction as he studied her, not as a problem to solve, but as something more unpredictable than he had first thought. The fire inside flickered, casting moving shadows across the doorway, light catching along the edge of his jaw, the line of his shoulders, the stillness that did not break even as the storm pushed harder behind him. Say them, he said finally. Not agreement. Not refusal. An opening. Small. Dangerous. Eliza hesitated, just for a second, feeling the weight of what she was about to do, the line she was about to cross that would not let her return to the person she had been before the storm. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. I stay, she said, holding his gaze, refusing to look away now. But I do not belong to you. The wind howled, louder, as if reacting to the words, as if the world itself understood the risk she had just taken. His hand did not move. His expression did not change. But something deeper shifted behind his eyes, something quieter, more dangerous than before. And for a long moment, he did not answer. The silence stretched just a second too long, long enough for the storm to push harder against the cabin, long enough for the cold to remind her what waited behind her if this broke the wrong way. Then Caleb moved. Not fast, not aggressive, just final. He turned, guiding her with him, his hand still at her arm as he stepped fully inside, pulling her across the threshold as the door slammed shut behind them with a heavy, echoing thud that sealed the storm out in one breath and trapped something else in with them in the next. Warmth hit her instantly. Not soft, not gentle. It came in a wave, sharp against her frozen skin, making her inhale too fast, too deep, the heat almost painful as it returned feeling to places she had already lost. The fire cracked low in the hearth, orange light flickering across rough wood walls, across the floor, across him. He let go of her slowly, not dropping her, not stepping away too far either, just enough that she had to stand on her own again. The distance between them changed. Not wide, never wide, but different now. The wind still screamed outside, muffled by thick timber, its presence felt in the way the walls creaked, in the faint whistle through unseen gaps. But inside, everything felt smaller, closer, more dangerous in a quieter way. Eliza swayed slightly, just enough. He saw it. Of course he did. His hand came back, steady at her elbow, holding her upright before she could fall, before she could pretend she did not need it. You stand, he said quietly. Not a command, a statement, like he was reminding her of something she still had. She tried. Her legs trembled, her breath uneven, but she did not collapse again. Not this time. His grip loosened, but did not leave completely, a silent boundary, a line she could lean into if she chose, or pull away from if she had the strength. The firelight moved across her face, catching the wet strands of hair clinging to her skin, the hollow beneath her eyes, the tension she held like it was the last thing keeping her upright. He watched it all, not hungrily, not softly, just completely. Take that off, he said after a moment, nodding toward her soaked coat. Practical, necessary, but the words settled heavier than they should have. She hesitated, not because she did not understand, because of what it meant. Exposure, vulnerability, being seen in a space where she had no control. His gaze did not shift. You keep that on, he added, voice lower now. You will not warm up. Logic, nothing else. Still, the air between them tightened. Eliza lifted her hand slowly, fingers stiff, struggling with the damp fabric, the movement clumsy, weaker than she wanted him to see. The coat slipped from her shoulders, heavy, dragging down her arms until it fell to the floor with a dull sound. The air touched her skin immediately, warmer than outside, but still sharp against what had been frozen too long. She drew in a breath, steadying herself. He did not move closer, but his eyes did not leave her. The firelight reflected there now, softer at the edges, but no less controlled. He reached past her then, close enough that his arm brushed hers, close enough that she felt the heat of him again without being held, grabbing a thick blanket from a chair. He did not hand it to her. He stepped in, closed the space, and draped it around her shoulders himself. The weight of it settled instantly, heavy, warm, grounding. His hands lingered for half a second longer than necessary at the edge of the fabric, adjusting it, securing it, not touching her skin, but close enough that she felt it anyway. Her breath caught, just slightly. His jaw tightened, almost imperceptible, as if he felt it too. Then he stepped back. Control. Always control. The distance returned, but not the same as before. Something had shifted. She clutched the blanket tighter around herself, fingers gripping the edge like it was more than warmth, like it was something holding her together. And then, before she could stop herself, before she could pull the words back, they slipped out, raw, unguarded, carrying more truth than she had meant to give. I would not have made it. The admission hung there, fragile, exposed, more dangerous than any bargain. His eyes lifted back to hers, something deeper moving behind them now, something that was not calculation anymore. Not entirely. No, he said quietly. And for the first time, his voice carried something else. Not softness. Not quite. But something that felt a lot like it. You would not have. The fire cracked again, louder this time, filling the space between them, but not breaking it. She did not look away. Neither did he. And in that moment, with the storm locked outside and the heat pressing in around them, the truth settled in a way she could not ignore anymore. She had stepped inside for shelter, but she was no longer sure that was the only reason she stayed. The fire burned lower than before. Not out. Not yet. But weaker, the flames pulling tight around the last of the wood as the wind outside rose into something harsher, deeper, a storm no longer passing through but settling in, claiming the night like it intended to stay. The cabin answered it with soft groans, beams shifting, the walls taking the strain, every sound a reminder that what stood between them and the cold was not as strong as it felt a moment ago. Eliza noticed it first in the silence between the cracks, in the way the warmth no longer reached as far, in the way her fingers tightened instinctively around the blanket without thinking. Caleb noticed everything else. His gaze moved once, slow, toward the hearth, then to the stack of wood beside it, smaller than it should have been, then to the door, where the wind pressed harder now, forcing fine lines of snow through the seams like the storm was testing for weakness. He did not say anything. Not yet. But something in him shifted again. Calculation turned to decision. He crossed the room, each step measured, controlled, feeding another log into the fire, kneeling close enough that the light caught along his hands, rough, steady, practiced, the kind of hands that knew how to keep things alive when the world tried to take them away. The flames answered, rising, but only slightly. Not enough. Eliza watched him, her breath still uneven, the warmth not quite reaching the cold that had settled too deep inside her. Is it going to hold? She asked, her voice quieter now, not from fear alone, but from something else, something closer to needing the answer than wanting it. He did not look at her right away. It will hold, he said after a second, adjusting the log, his tone even. Then a pause. If the storm does not get worse. It was not reassurance. It was truth. And somehow that felt heavier. The wind howled again, louder, pushing hard enough that the door shuddered once, the latch rattling in its place. Eliza flinched before she could stop herself. Caleb saw it. Of course he did. He stood, turning slightly, placing himself between her and the door without thinking about it, without announcing it, his body becoming a barrier in the most natural way, as if that was where he had always intended to stand. Protection. Silent. Immediate. She felt it again. Not just the safety, the weight of it. The kind that came with expectation. The kind that did not come without cost. Her grip on the blanket tightened. You said nothing is free, she murmured, her eyes lifting to him again, searching, steady despite everything pressing down around them. Does that include this? A glance toward the fire. The warmth. Him. His jaw set slightly, the muscle there tightening before he answered. Everything inside these walls has a price, he said, voice low, controlled, but something deeper threaded through it now, something that was not as distant as before. Even staying alive. The words landed harder than the wind outside. Eliza swallowed, her chest tightening, the truth of it cutting through whatever fragile sense of safety she had begun to feel. She took a step forward before she could stop herself. Just one. Close enough that the heat between them changed again. Close enough that she could see the faint tension in his shoulders, the way he held himself back. Always back, even now. "And what happens when I cannot pay it?" she asked. There was no tremble this time. Just honesty. Raw. Exposed. The question stayed in the air, heavier than anything that had come before it. Caleb looked at her then. Fully. Not past her. Not through her. At her. His eyes held hers longer this time, searching something, weighing something that had nothing to do with the storm anymore. His answer came slower. "Then you learn what it costs to owe," he said quietly. Not a threat. Worse. A fact. The fire cracked sharply, sending a burst of sparks upward, the light shifting across both of them, closer now than they had been since she stepped inside. The wind roared again, violent, relentless, and this time something else came with it. A sound beneath the storm. Faint. Distant. But not natural. Caleb's head turned instantly toward the door, his entire body going still. In a way that felt different, sharper, alert in a way the storm alone had not caused. Eliza felt it before she understood it. The shift. The danger. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. He did not answer right away. His eyes narrowed slightly, listening, measuring the silence between the gusts of wind. Then it came again. Not the storm. Something else. Closer this time. And suddenly, the cabin did not feel as isolated as it had before. The sound came again, sharper now, cutting through the storm like something alive, something moving against the wind instead of with it. And Caleb did not hesitate this time, his body already turning fully toward the door, shoulders squared, every line of him tightening into something ready. The cabin seemed smaller suddenly, the fire dimmer, the air heavier as the storm outside roared louder, pressing against the walls as if trying to force its way in, as if whatever was out there had found a reason to come closer. Eliza felt it too, the shift from isolation to something else, something worse, her breath catching as her eyes locked onto him, waiting, needing, though she had not meant to need anything from him at all. "Stay back," he said, low, controlled, but different now, the tone leaving no room for argument, not harsh, but absolute. She did not move, not because she could not, because something in his voice held her there stronger than the storm ever could. He stepped toward the door, slow, deliberate, each movement measured, listening between the gusts of wind, his hand hovering near the latch, but not touching it yet, as if opening it would change everything in a way that could not be undone. The sound came again, closer, a scrape, a shift, not loud, but wrong. Eliza took a step forward before she realized she had moved, drawn by something she could not name, fear or something dangerously close to trust. "You said I would not make it 10 yards, she said, her voice barely above the storm, but it reached him anyway. He did not turn. "You would not," he answered, steady, eyes fixed on the door. "Then do not open it," she said, the words leaving her before she could stop them, before she could pull them back into something safer, something less revealing. Silence followed, heavy and immediate, broken only by the violent push of wind against wood, by the fire snapping behind them like a warning. His hand lowered slightly from the latch. Not fully. Not yet. Just enough to show hesitation. That was new. Eliza saw it. Felt it. The smallest crack in the control he had held so tightly since she stepped into his world. She moved closer. Another step. Then another. Until the distance between them disappeared again. Until she stood just behind him. Close enough to feel the heat of his back. Close enough that her breath brushed against his shoulder when she spoke again. Quieter now, but stronger. "You do not owe whatever is out there anything," she said. "But you do not owe me either." The words landed differently this time. Not a challenge. Not a bargain. Something closer to truth. Raw and unguarded. His shoulders tightened under her breath, under the weight of what she had just said. For a moment, neither of them moved. The storm raged. The cabin held. And in that narrow space between danger and decision, something shifted again, deeper this time, something neither of them had planned for. Slowly he turned, not away from the door, toward her. Close. Too close now. The space between them gone entirely. Her back brushing the rough wood beside the door, his presence filling everything in front of her, the firelight catching in his eyes, darker now, more intense, something unspoken rising there that had nothing to do with the storm anymore. "You think this is about owing?" he asked, voice low, closer than before, the words not leaving room to escape. Her breath faltered, not from fear alone. Something else threading through it now, something that made her hold his gaze instead of looking away. Then what is it about? She whispered. The question barely existed in the air before he answered. Control, he said, his voice dropping even lower. Almost a confession, almost a warning. And knowing when to let go of it. The words settled between them, heavy, charged, the meaning deeper than either of them had spoken out loud before. The storm slammed against the cabin again, harder than anything before it, the door rattling under the force, the latch shaking violently, as if something on the other side had finally reached it. Eliza's hand moved without thinking, gripping his sleeve, not pulling him back, not pushing him forward. Just holding him there, in that moment, in that choice. His eyes flicked down to her hand, then back to her face, something breaking through the control he had held for so long, something raw, unguarded, real. And then, just as suddenly, the sound came again, right against the door. Not the wind, not this time. A knock. The knock did not come again, not right away, and somehow, that made it worse. The storm still raged, wind clawing at the cabin, snow hissing against the wood, but inside, everything slowed, stretched thin, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Caleb did not move. Neither did Eliza. Her hand still gripped his sleeve, not as tightly now, but not gone either, her fingers resting there like she had forgotten how to let go. His gaze dropped to it once, brief, then lifted again, not meeting her eyes this time, but settling somewhere just past her, as if he needed distance he could not physically create. The fire behind them cracked softly, weaker now, the flames lower, shadows longer, shifting across the walls in uneven patterns that made the room feel smaller than before. The warmth was still there, but it no longer felt certain. It flickered, like everything else. Eliza slowly loosened her hold, her hand sliding away from his sleeve, the absence immediate, noticeable, colder than the air itself. She stepped back, just enough to breathe without him in front of her, just enough to feel the space return, though it did not feel like safety anymore. It felt like something missing. Her shoulders pulled tighter under the blanket, her fingers curling into the fabric as if holding on to something she could still control. You did not open it, she said quietly. Not a question, not quite relief. Something softer, more complicated. Caleb exhaled slowly, his breath visible in the dim light, his jaw tight, his eyes still on the door. Not yet, he answered. The words settled heavily between them. Not yet, meaning he still might, meaning the choice had not passed. Eliza's gaze followed his to the door, to the latch that had stopped rattling, to the wood that now held still under the storm's assault. But the silence outside was wrong. Too clean, too empty. The kind of quiet that did not belong to a storm this strong. It should not be that quiet. She murmured, more to herself than to him. He heard it anyway. Of course he did. His shoulders shifted slightly, tension coiling there again, sharper now, more focused. He took one step toward the door, then stopped. Not because of fear, because of thought, because something about this did not fit. Eliza watched him, the distance between them now filled with something heavier than before, something neither of them had named, but both had felt. The moment at the door had changed it. Whatever they had been before that knock, they were not anymore. She was not just someone seeking shelter. He was not just a man offering it at a cost. Something had crossed between them. Quiet, unspoken, permanent. The fire dimmed again, the light pulling back, leaving more of the room in shadow, the edges of things less clear. Caleb reached for another log, then stopped halfway, his hand hovering above the wood, his attention snapping back to the door as a new sound broke through the silence. Softer this time. Not a knock. A shift, like something brushing against the wood from the outside. Slow, deliberate. Eliza felt it in her chest before she understood it, her breath catching, her body going still as her eyes locked onto the door again. That is not the wind, she whispered. Caleb did not answer. He stepped closer to the door, one careful step, then another, his hand rising again toward the latch, slower this time, more controlled, as if he was measuring not just the movement, but the consequence behind it. The sound came again, a faint scrape, then nothing, then a pause, long enough to feel intentional. Eliza's fingers tightened in the blanket, her pulse loud in her ears, the silence stretching until it almost broke. Caleb's hand hovered just inches from the latch. And then, from the other side of the door, through the storm, through the wood, through the silence that should not have been there, a voice. Low, faint, almost lost to the wind. Please. The voice did not come again right away, and that silence was worse than the storm, worse than the knock, because it meant whoever stood out there was waiting, listening, just like they were. Caleb's hand remained inches from the latch, unmoving, every muscle held tight beneath stillness that was no longer calm, but controlled restraint. Eliza felt it shift. In him, subtle but undeniable, the way a man changes when something from his past steps too close to his present. Her breath slowed, not from safety, but from focus, her eyes no longer fixed only on the door, but on him. Watching, reading, understanding something she had not before. You know that voice, she said quietly. Not a guess, not a question, a statement. It landed, harder than the knock. Caleb did not turn, but his jaw tightened, just enough. Confirmation. The fire snapped low behind them, shadows stretching longer across the floor, the cabin holding its breath again as the storm pressed closer, louder, like it was circling now instead of passing through. Eliza stepped forward, not hesitant this time, not fragile. One step, then another, until she stood beside him, not behind, not sheltered, but level, her presence no longer something he managed, but something that stood with him. That changed everything. His eyes flicked toward her then, quick, sharp, measuring the difference. She held his gaze, did not look away. If you open that door, she said, voice steady despite the storm raging around them, it is not just the storm that comes in. Silence followed. Heavy, real. His eyes stayed on hers longer this time, searching for something, weighing something that had nothing to do with survival anymore. You do not know that, he said finally, but the certainty was gone, replaced by something tighter, something closer to warning than truth. Eliza inhaled slowly, the blanket still wrapped around her, but her posture no longer that of someone seeking warmth. She was bracing now, standing, choosing. I do, she said. And then she did something she had not done since she stepped inside. She reached into the folds of the blanket, her fingers moving with intention, not hesitation, pulling something free that had been hidden against her side the entire time. Caleb saw it instantly. His entire body stilled, not with surprise, with recognition. A small metal object, dull in the firelight, cold, real, a badge, worn, marked, the kind that carried weight far beyond its size. Eliza held it up just enough for the light to catch the engraving, her eyes never leaving his as she spoke, quieter now, but with a clarity that cut through everything else. I was not walking to find shelter, she said. The storm roared outside, louder as if reacting to the shift inside the cabin. Caleb's gaze dropped to the badge, then lifted back to her face, something deeper breaking through his control now, something that had been buried long before she arrived. Recognition, not of her, of what she represented. Then why are you here? He asked, his voice lower, tighter, no longer neutral. Eliza did not answer right away. She did not need to. The silence between them filled with it. The truth, the change, the fact that whatever this had been, it was not anymore. Her fingers tightened slightly around the badge, then loosened, as if the weight of it had already done what it was meant to do. Because, she said finally, her voice steady, her gaze unbreaking, the man they told me to find lives alone in a cabin exactly like this. The fire cracked sharply behind them. The wind slammed against the walls. And for the first time, Caleb Ward did not look like the man in control of the room. The badge did not move in her hand, but everything else did. The air, the silence, the balance between them shifting so sharply it felt like the ground had tilted beneath the cabin itself. Outside, the storm surged into something relentless, wind slamming hard enough to rattle the beams, snow driving against the walls like it wanted in, like it had found something worth breaking for. Caleb did not step back. He did not step forward. But something inside him gave way, not in weakness, not in surrender, but in recognition, the kind that comes too late to undo anything that has already begun. His eyes locked onto hers again. No distance left, no pretense of control, untouched now. You walked into my door knowing exactly who I was, he said, voice lower, stripped of its earlier distance, carrying something heavier now, something closer to truth than command. Eliza did not flinch. She held his gaze, the badge still between them, no longer a shield, but not hidden either. I walked into a storm, she answered, steady, even as the wind howled louder. And you were inside it. The words landed differently. Not accusation, not defense, something closer to inevitability. The fire snapped behind them, weaker now, the warmth thinning as the night pressed harder against the walls, reminding them both that time was not on their side. Another scrape came. From the door. Closer. Slower. The voice followed again, faint, strained, almost swallowed by the wind. Please, open. Caleb's gaze flicked to the door, then back to Eliza, faster this time, sharper, the decision pressing in from all sides now. The storm, the voice, her, everything closing in at once. You came for me, he said, not a question, not anymore. Her fingers tightened slightly around the badge, then lowered it, the metal catching one last flicker of firelight before it dropped to her side. I came because they said you do not open doors, she replied. A beat, and I needed to know if that was true. The storm slammed again, harder, the latch rattling violently, as if something on the other side had leaned into it, testing it, waiting. Caleb's hand rose again, closer to the latch than before, but this time his hesitation was not about the storm. It was about her. About what opening that door would mean now that everything between them had changed. If I open it, he said, his voice tight, controlled, but no longer untouched, who walks in first? Eliza did not answer right away. The question was not simple. It was not about the door. It was about everything that had been set in motion the moment she stepped inside. She took a step closer, close enough that the space between them disappeared again, her breath catching slightly as it met his, warm against the cold that still lingered between them. That depends, she said softly, her eyes holding his, unbreaking, on whether you are the man they warned me about, or the one who pulled me out of the storm. The words settled deep, too deep to ignore. His jaw tightened, the muscle there shifting as the weight of both truths pressed against each other, neither one fully winning. The storm roared. The voice outside went quiet again, too quiet. And then, from beneath the wind, from just beyond the door, came something else. A second sound. Not a voice. Not a knock. A step. Another presence. Caleb's hand froze inches from the latch. His eyes darkened, sharper now, something protective rising in them that had nothing to do with the deal, nothing to do with control anymore. Eliza felt it, saw it, and for the first time, she understood what opening that door would cost both of them. Her voice dropped, barely more than a breath, but it held. If you open it, you cannot go back. The wind screamed. The cabin held. His hand hovered. And then, slowly, he began to turn the latch. The latch turned. Slow. Deliberate. And then nothing. The door did not open. Caleb's hand remained on the wood, fingers wrapped around the cold metal, his body still, his breath steady, but something had shifted in the space behind him. The storm had not stopped, not fully, but it had changed, the rage breaking into something quieter, the wind lowering to a distant howl instead of a constant assault. The silence that followed inside the cabin felt heavier than any noise. Eliza did not move. She stood close enough to feel the tension in his back, the weight of the decision pressing through him, through the wood, through everything that had brought them to this moment. He did not open it. Not yet. Not now. The voice outside did not return. The second presence did not press again. Only the wind, softer now, slipping through the cracks like it had lost interest in forcing its way in. Caleb slowly released the latch. His hand lingered there for a second longer, as if acknowledging something unseen on the other side, then dropped. The choice had been made. Not with force, not with defiance, but with restraint. He turned back to her. The fire had burned low, reduced to a quiet glow, casting a softer light across the room, across her face, across the space between them that no longer felt like a boundary, but something else entirely. Eliza watched him, her breath slower now, her shoulders no longer held as tight beneath the blanket, though the cold had not fully left her. Neither had the tension, but it had changed. It no longer pushed them apart. It held them in place. You did not open it, she said again, quieter this time, the words carrying something different now. Not doubt, not testing, something closer to understanding. Caleb met her gaze, and for the first time, There was no distance in it. No calculation. No wall. Just a man who had made a choice he could not undo and did not want to. No, he said. A simple answer. But it settled deeper than anything he had said before. Eliza's fingers loosened slightly around the blanket, her hand dropping to her side, the badge still there, but no longer held up between them. It did not disappear. It did not lose its meaning, but it no longer defined the moment. She took a step closer, not out of need, not out of weakness, because she chose to. The space between them closed again, but this time, there was no tension pulling it tight, only something quieter, something steadier. Caleb did not step back. He did not reach for her either. He simply stood there, letting her close the distance, letting her stand where she wanted to stand, not where he had placed her. That was new. That was everything. The fire cracked softly behind them, the last of the warmth settling into the room as the storm outside faded into a distant echo, no longer pressing against the walls, no longer demanding entry. The world beyond the cabin had not changed. It was still harsh, still unforgiving. But inside, something had. Eliza looked at him, really looked this time, past the control, past the strength, to the quiet restraint that had held him at that door. You could have opened it, she said. He nodded once. I could have. A pause. Then, softer. I did not want to. The words stayed between them, simple, but final in a way that no bargain had been. Eliza exhaled slowly, the tension she had carried since the storm beginning to ease, not disappearing, but settling into something she could hold without breaking. Her voice came out quieter than before, but clearer. Neither did I. Outside, the wind moved across the plains, no longer howling, just passing through, leaving the land as it found it. Inside, the fire burned low, the lights soft, the air still. Caleb's gaze did not leave hers. And for the first time, neither of them needed it to. Because some choices are not made in the moment of action, but in the moment you decide what you are willing to protect and what you are finally ready to keep. Morning came quietly, not with light, but with absence, the storm gone, the wind reduced to a distant whisper across the plains, leaving behind a stillness that felt almost unfamiliar after the night had pressed so hard against the walls. Pale light filtered through the narrow gaps in the wooden shutters, thin and cold, stretching across the cabin floor in long, muted lines that revealed more than they warmed. The fire had burned down to embers, a faint glow beneath ash, barely enough to hold the chill at bay. The air inside no longer harsh, but not gentle either. It lingered, like something that had not fully decided to leave. Eliza stirred first, not suddenly, slowly, like someone returning from somewhere deeper than sleep. The blanket still wrapped around her shoulders had slipped slightly, one edge brushing the floor. Her fingers curled loosely into the fabric as if holding onto it had become instinct. Her breath moved steady now, no longer uneven, but still measured, aware of the quiet in a way that had not been possible in the storm. She opened her eyes. The cabin looked different in the morning light. Smaller, simpler, real. Nothing hidden in shadow now, no place for uncertainty to linger without being seen. Her gaze shifted. Caleb was already awake. Of course he was. He stood near the window, one hand resting against the wooden frame, looking out at the land beyond, his posture unchanged in its steadiness. But something in him had softened, not in weakness, but in the way a man stands when the fight has passed, and what remains is something quieter. He did not turn right away. He knew she was awake. She knew he knew. The silence between them held, but it no longer felt like distance. It felt like space given, not taken. Eliza pushed herself up slowly, the movement careful, deliberate, her body still carrying the weight of the night, the cold that had seeped too deep to leave all at once. The blanket slipped further, and this time she let it, catching it loosely at her shoulders instead of clutching it tight. Another change. Small, but real. Caleb finally turned then. Not quickly, not sharply, just enough to meet her gaze. The light caught his face differently in the morning, revealing lines that had been hidden in shadow before, the quiet aftermath of choices made, of things not done, of doors not opened. They looked at each other, and for the first time, there was no question in it. No test, no demand, just recognition. Eliza's hand moved slightly, brushing against the small metal weight at her side. The badge. It was still there, still real, still part of who she was. but it did not come between them anymore. She did not raise it. She did not hide it either. She simply let it exist. Like the truth. Caleb's eyes flicked to it once, brief, then returned to her face, not dismissing it, not challenging it, just accepting what it meant without letting it define what stood between them now. He stepped away from the window, crossing the room slowly, the distance between them closing not out of urgency, but choice. He stopped a few feet from her, close enough to feel, not close enough to claim. That line remained, but it had changed. It was no longer a boundary of control. It was a boundary of respect. Storm passed, he said, his voice low, steady, carrying the calm that had settled into the cabin. Eliza nodded slightly, her eyes holding his. Yes. A pause. Then, softer. But it did not take everything with it. He understood. He always had. That was the difference now. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of everything that had happened, everything that had almost happened, everything that would never happen the same way again. Caleb's hand moved, not toward her, not quite, but enough to reach the edge of the blanket at her shoulder, adjusting it slightly where it had slipped. The gesture simple, practical, but carrying more weight now than it had the night before. His fingers lingered for a fraction longer than necessary, not touching her skin, not crossing the line, but close enough that the space between them held something unspoken. Eliza did not pull away. She did not lean in either. She just stayed, and that was enough. Outside, the land stretched wide and empty, the storm erased as if it had never been, leaving no trace of what it had forced, what it had revealed, what it had changed. But inside the cabin, nothing had been erased. It remained. Quiet. Steady. Real. Eliza's gaze shifted once more to the door, now still, closed, no longer threatened, but not forgotten either. Then back to him. What happens now? She asked. Not uncertain. Not afraid. Just asking. Caleb held her gaze, the answer not immediate, not simple, but something he did not turn away from. That depends, he said, his voice steady, grounded, on whether you walk out of here, or stay long enough to see what this place becomes after the storm. The words settled between them, not a demand, not a promise, but something in between, something open, something unfinished. And for the first time, Eliza did not feel like she had to choose right away. By evening, the land had changed again. Not by force, not by storm, but by something quieter, something that settled over the plains like a breath finally released. The sky stretched wide above them, endless and open, painted in long bands of amber and fading gold as the sun sank low against the horizon. The wind had softened into something almost gentle, brushing through the tall grass in slow, steady waves that whispered instead of howled. The world no longer pressed in. It opened. Eliza stood just outside the cabin, the worn wooden steps beneath her boots, the air still carrying a trace of cold, but no longer biting, no longer threatening. She had not left. Not when the light came. Not when the land made it clear she could. That was the difference now. Choice. Real. Undeniable. Her fingers rested lightly at her sides, no longer gripping for warmth, no longer holding on to something just to stay upright. She was steady. Caleb stood a few feet away, near the fence line, his hat low against the fading light, his shoulders broad against the horizon, the kind of presence that did not need to move to be felt. He had not asked her to stay. Not once. And somehow, that had made it impossible to leave. The silence between them was no longer filled with tension that demanded resolution. It held something else now. Something that did not need to be spoken to exist. Eliza stepped down from the porch. One step, then another. The distance between them closed slowly, naturally, until she stood beside him, not behind, not waiting, but there. Equal. The light caught in her hair, in the lines of her face that no longer carried the same exhaustion, replaced by something steadier, something that had chosen to remain even when it could have walked away. Caleb turned his head slightly, just enough to look at her, his gaze no longer guarded, no longer measuring what she might take, or what he might owe. It held something quieter, something certain. His hand moved, not quickly, not claiming, but reaching the edge of her sleeve, adjusting it against. The breeze that moved across the land, the gesture simple, grounding, familiar now in a way it had not been before. His fingers stayed there a moment longer. Not holding, not trapping, just there. Eliza did not pull away. She did not lean in either. She simply stood with him, her shoulder close enough to feel the warmth of his presence, the distance between them no longer something that needed to be negotiated. It had already been chosen. The cabin behind them stood quiet, no longer a place of survival alone, but something more, something that had held them through the storm and did not feel empty now that it had passed. The land stretched beyond it, wide and uncertain, but no longer something she faced alone. Eliza's gaze moved across the horizon, then back to him, her voice soft, but clear. I could still leave. It was not a threat, not even a question, just truth. Caleb nodded once, his eyes meeting hers, steady, unshaken. You could. A pause. Then, quieter. But you did not. The words settled between them, not heavy, not binding, but real in a way that did not need anything more. Eliza let out a slow breath, the kind that carried everything she had been holding on to, everything she had fought through, everything she had almost lost. Her hand moved slightly, brushing against his, not by accident, not entirely. He did not pull away. The contact was brief. Simple. But it remained. The sun dipped lower, the light stretching longer across the plains, wrapping the two of them in something warm, something steady, something that did not demand anything except that they remain where they were. Together. And as the last of the light settled over the land, Caleb's voice came again, quiet, certain, carrying no demand, no condition, only truth. Some storms do not come to break you, he said. Some come to show you where you are meant to stay.